This is a time of a lot of loss in many different ways. It's also a time of hope, especially as we think of issues like racial justice, that there are new conversations. Even when we think of COVID, that for as much as we've lost in terms of office culture, there's also a ton of hope and opportunity and new ways of working.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skill set to be successful? Welcome, everyone, to the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast. I'm your host, Saba Kidwai. Join me each week as I share the stories and strategies from the world's leading researchers and practitioners about why they believe the answer lies in practicing design thinking. A few weeks after losing her husband, Dave, Sheryl Sandberg was talking to a friend about how to prepare for an upcoming father-child activity. "I want Dave," she said. Her friend put an arm around her and said, "Option A is not available, so let's just kick the shit out of option B." These days, we're all living some form of option B. To best navigate how to make the best out of the situation to where it may even present itself as better than what we had imagined in our option A's, I invited Bree Groff to the show. Bree journeyed from education to enterprise as a change agent. Starting her career as a math and physics teacher, she later became the innovation department chair of a K-12 school. Today, she's a change expert at SYPartners, where she advises leaders on transformation, innovation, and organizational design, working with companies like Calvin Klein, Adobe, Google, Etsy, Capital One, and Dropbox. I first heard Bree speak at a design sprint conference last year. We have similar career journeys, and what we also share is our belief that change begins with empathy. Over the years, Bree has identified 6 types of loss that we go through when experiencing change. And today, she's going to talk through them with us and how we can address them so that we can all kick the shit out of option B and emerge stronger and better. For Bree, that change begins with learning to say goodbye to what no longer is.
It's one of those times in history where I wish my area of expertise wasn't coming in so handy. But you are right. This is a time of a lot of loss in many different ways. It's also a time of hope, especially as we think of issues like racial justice, that there are new conversations. Even when we think of COVID, that for as much as we've lost in terms of office culture, there's also a ton of hope and opportunity and new ways of working. So the trick is, and as you mentioned, is really understanding where you are in the change process, or where your friends are, your colleagues are, those you lead are. And, I talk a lot about as you mentioned, that people aren't really resisting change. They're resisting the loss associated with change. And the saying goodbye, the acknowledgement of that loss, is the first step in change. Whereas if you think organizationally, a lot of leaders will want to talk about, in fact, they're like trained this way. Their instincts tell them all this, that they're programmed to think about the future. I'm leading forward, I'm inspiring, I'm giving hope. But really, sometimes that's not at all where people are. And so while you have hope and loss and fear all sort of commingling, the first step in this process is really acknowledging what we are saying goodbye to, whether that is good or bad, and just allowing people to have the emotion of grief, which can be sort of a strong word in like a organizational context, but it's maybe not the wrong word. Just allowing people to feel, our offices may never be like they felt before. Schools will never be like what they felt before. Maybe to like the way we shop, the way we visit people. There's so much that is changing. And the best way that I know to help people through that is to take a beat for it. Um, or if you've ever been in a situation where like you're really upset about something and someone says like, oh, think about the bright side and like what's to come and like cheer up. It's just sometimes that's not what people need. Sometimes people just need an ear or a shoulder or someone to acknowledge what they are going through, because we are all going through so much for the very first time. So when I work with leaders or even with colleagues, my advice always is to meet people where they are. And where they are is could be in survival mode, could be in growth mode, could be in adaptation mode, and whatever mode that is okay.
Bree highlights a key concept here, that when navigating change, everyone is in a different place. Perhaps one of the most popular representations of this idea is the diffusion of innovation theory by Rogers in 1962, where he categorized people into 5 different groups across a spectrum, ranging from early adopters, those who are quick to embrace new ideas, to the laggards, those who are bound by tradition and skeptical when it comes to change. Bree's career has given her the opportunity to work with organizations and people across many different industries. I asked her to share her journey and how it helped her develop her framework for how everyone along the diffusion of innovation theory spectrum can begin to navigate change.
Yeah, I had sort of a winding road, a really good road in my career and life so far. My first job out of college, I was a 7th grade math teacher. I spent a bunch of time in education, taught high school physics, high school math, high school psychology. Actually, I from there became an instructional coach and then had the opportunity to found and lead an innovation department within a school. And actually, I took about 9 months off to be an actress in LA. That's the part of the story I skip over a lot of times, but I think it's important to know like all the divergent paths. Like all of these, and that was all like pre-consulting even, which has been the focus of my career for a good long time now. All of the experiences I've had, it's easy in hindsight to draw a through line. At the time, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, especially in my 20s. You just make it up one step at a time. In hindsight, though, my work in education, in innovation, in transformation consultancy, it's all really been about behavior change, about understanding how people grow and learn. And so certainly as when I was a teacher, that was quite obvious, like how my students grow and learn, how I can help them be the authors of their lives. That sort of shifted then when I became an instructional coach and started thinking about how people grow and learn as adults, as leaders in the workplace. And now more recently, after education, I moved to innovation consulting and organizational design consulting. And now I'm at SYPartners and would call it probably most accurately transformation consulting. All of that is really about how organizations grow and learn. And so it's a through line of, decades ago, I would ask a 14-year-old, like, who do you want to be? Like, what interests you? Where do you want to go? How can I help you? I have faith in you. I will help you get there. And now I just do that same thing, but for Fortune 500 companies and CEOs. Like, who do you want to be? I actually had this conversation with the CEO this morning of a Fortune 500 company. Like, where do you want to take the company? Who do you want to become? And the same messages. I have faith in you. We will help you get there. There's really few wrong answers. It's just in my life, it's just been a really great evolution of helping, 14-year-olds to CEOs think about what do they want to do with themselves.
One of the hardest parts about change is seeing how and where you fit in. Our identity is often tied to what we do. And when that changes, it can feel as if we are losing a part of ourselves and who we are. I've talked about the book, Life is in the Transitions by Bruce Feiler before, and it's one that I feel is incredibly relevant for right now. Feiler calls a massive change a lifequake. I love that term. Lifequakes, he says, can be personal or professional. And as the case for many of us right now, it can be both at the same time. In his book, he shares that the most powerful way to navigate a lifequake is how you see yourself in your story. Are you a hero, a victim, a warrior, or a caretaker? But what he says matters even more is how you adapt, revise, and rewrite that story. Knowing where to begin that story can often seem really daunting. So I asked Bree to share what a good first step would be for when you are ready to begin rewriting your narrative.
I would first acknowledge that some people are in just sheer survival mode. Like, I need a job. I need to pay my bills. And if that's the case, like, do what you have to do. For those who have opportunity to think proactively about like, what would I want to take my career? What would I want to do if you have, many opportunities to chase different paths? I guess tell the story of my like early career in my 20s. I felt a lot of anxiety about what was I going to be when I grow up? Like, it felt like I really wanted to sort it out at the time. It felt like, and not even a lot of pressure from anywhere. Like, my parents were always just sort of generically proud of me no matter what I did. It was really me feeling like I needed to get somewhere, do something. But my very best life memories are when I let that go a bit. So my time as an actor, I look back on that and think, life is really long. No one really knows now, except I'm telling you and whoever listens to this, but like, it's not on my LinkedIn profile. No one really cares. It was a grand adventure that I'm so glad that I took. And I was able to support myself at the time with tutoring and some hostessing. And, it just sort of, I didn't need much at the time. No husband, no kids. It was great. And, even when I think about now, I think about every like few months or year as like a really important career decision of like, how I'm going to grow or get to the next step. And then I have to like put myself ahead 10, 20 years and think like, if we're lucky, life really is long. And the best parts, I think the reason I'm lucky enough to have enough like diversity of background, of insights, of experiences is because I took a few detours. And I think it's actually my time in acting that makes me a good public speaker, which I do a lot for my role. It was my time in the classroom that helps me facilitate groups of leaders. I even spent some time at eHarmony as a research assistant. And that time like really helps me understand decision making and communication from a psychological perspective. And, it all sort of adds up in the end. It's just not obvious at the time. And that's the trick.
One of the things that I love about what Bree shares about her journey were all of her divergent paths. Whether it was her time at eHarmony or her time as an actress, each of those allowed her to develop a skill set that makes her unique and enhances the work that she does. So at this time, as you're thinking about what's next, it might not be something directly related to what you used to do. Sometimes we need the time and space to explore different areas, which always have a really interesting way of being connected back to what we do in the long term. So Bree has identified 6 stages of loss that we experience. How we rewrite our story in each of these areas is critical to our ability to enhance not only our resiliency, but our ability to embrace what might be. From Lima to Stockholm, Bree says, these 6 types of loss resonate with everyone the same worldwide.
So the 6 types, to let the cat out of the bag. So loss of control, loss of pride, loss of narrative, loss of time, loss of competence, and loss of familiarity. And these six came from um, me mapping. Actually, a lot of it came from my time in education, seeing teachers adapt or not want to adapt to change, but also mapping a lot of client engagements across like what was I seeing here? Where was this resistance coming from? And I found that these six were, I don't know, there's probably 7 or 8 out in the world. Maybe there's 20. But the six really seem to encapsulate, they gave me a good working framework for understanding where I saw resistance, what was underneath that. And so, yes, so then I started speaking about this, and I've given this talk dozens and dozens of times around the world now. And it resonates the same in Lima as it does in Stockholm, as it does in San Diego, as it does in New York. So it makes me feel like there is something human and fundamental about how we experience change and loss. And to sort of walk through each one, loss of control is, like humans can actually take on a ton of change if it's change that we want. So if you imagine, if you choose to move somewhere, like even across the country or to a different country, that's an enormous amount of change from like where you live, where you grocery shop, who you see every day, what the weather is like, the time, like it's an extraordinary amount of change, but people do it because they want it. And the trick comes, especially in organizations, when there's some change that we did not pick ourselves. So it's not necessarily like too much change is bad. It's that too much change we didn't choose feels bad. And that comes with a sense of loss of control. And so, my best guidance here, especially to leaders, is anytime you can allow people choice over some aspect of the change, do it. So, for example, like we are increasing our emphasis on this kind of skill in the company. But to adopt this skill, you can work with a colleague and form a little study group. You could read some books, you could take a training, you could work with a mentor that allowing people some sense of control. It's the same. I have a 5-year-old, and it's the same for her as it is for adults. Like, she doesn't like to be told what to do all the time. Surprise, surprise. But when I say, do you want to take a bath in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? She's like, 10 minutes, as opposed to like, do you want to take a bath? And she'll tell me no. And so it's not that we want to trick the people that we work with, but the notion is that like control breeds a sense of familiarity, of autonomy, of responsibility. That's just really important in change.
So the first one Bree just shared was loss of control. Allowing people choice over change allows everyone to feel as if they are a part of the process. It allows people to feel both seen and heard. A lot of times, this is a step that we overlook because it takes time, or we might just be really excited about what the change is that we're trying to implement. Too often, though, decisions are made amongst a few and then passed down to everyone else. And the number one challenge here is that not only do people not feel included, they often don't understand why things have to change. This is where empathy interviews can play a really critical role. It's through these that we can understand people's fears and motivations and design for change in a way that's more inclusive. The next one Bree shares is loss of pride.
This is really about acknowledging that whatever got you to today was probably a good thing, even if things are not perfect in your life or in your company. That sometimes in change, we'll see leaders try to champion the future, but they might do it at the expense of the past. So we are moving into this like new world of, you name it, like automation, AI, the whatever feels trend of innovation, of whatever direction you're moving. But to the degree that that means that something that you did before is outdated, irrelevant, it's important to acknowledge what that is for people and who might feel that the hardest. So for example, we were working with a marketing department at a time they were moving from print to digital advertising or putting more focus on the latter. And we saw it was really hard for this VP of marketing because she had really built her career on print advertising and she had expertise in it. She felt proud of this team that she had built. And to move away from it was it was the right thing. It was the way the world was moving. But it also, in some ways, made her, what she had built, a bit antiquated. And so the answer is not to forego the change or not to like move where the world is moving, but rather to acknowledge with gratitude, allow people to have pride. And the reason that this company is where we are today is because we have been so excellent at print for so long. And the world's changing and so are we. But to make sure that it's, and change you're not discounting. The same thing, I'll give a sort of wild other possible personal example is like for anybody who is divorced, people have different, well, I'm not for the record, my husband's in the other room. So hopefully he doesn't overhear me and get strange ideas. But there's like, of the people that I know who are divorced, it doesn't feel great to be like, oh, that was a huge mistake. 10 years of my life out the window. There can be a ton of dissonance. Instead, it's like, you know what? I had a relationship that worked for a really long time, that was great for a really long time, and then it stopped working. And that's okay. And obviously that's not true of every like divorce or breakup story, but to allow people the opportunity to maintain the pride in what they've done to date, allows them then to move forward knowing that they're not throwing something away in service of something new. They are building on what has gotten them here.
Loss of pride is one that we see often. We live in a time of such accelerated change that we almost feel as if we can't learn fast enough to keep up. I found that one of the most liberating experiences to acknowledge is that we can't know everything and we can't be good at everything, but we're all good at something. That self-awareness about where you're strong, what skills you bring to the table, is the difference that makes a difference. One of my favorite episodes on the podcast is with Bob Gower and Alexandra Jameson. They talk about the importance of not only communication and collaboration, but the importance of team psychological safety. When we feel safe and trust the people that we're working with, we feel comfortable sharing what we know and vulnerable enough to share what we don't know and where we might need help. The third type of loss that Bree's going to talk about is loss of narrative.
It's similar to loss of pride, but if you imagine at, say, Thanksgiving dinner, if you're an American, and you have a cousin there who says like, oh, what do you do? What do you do for work? Like, tell me your job. I haven't heard about it in a while. You'd probably start with, well, this is what I do. This is who the company is. This is why we do it. I like it because of X, Y, Z. We all have these sort of shortcut narratives for how we think about, I think from an organizational perspective, how we think about our work, our roles. When I think about it from an education perspective, now I saw lots of teachers hold the narrative that direct instruction, like, it was still the best way to deliver content. Or even like there's so many, or that like subjects need to be divided by subject, and that there's just like conventions, truths, stories that we've told over time, that the more you tell them, the stickier they get. And if you're asking people in change to rewrite some of those stories, it can be tricky at best to figure out what the new story is, but at worst, it can just feel embarrassing. Like, I've been saying our company's all about X for all this time, but now that's not true. Now it's about Y. I've been saying that, I love my work because I get to A, but now actually we're not doing that. So do I love it? Yeah, I guess I love it, but for B. It's all of that, or even to like when I think about another past client, the the reputation certain departments can get within an organization of like, this team is great, or oh, this team is rough, or like it's all like, people need to hold in their head a narrative that's protected, that makes them feel valued. And just sometimes in change, if you change too quickly, if you jerk the wheel too much, you're just asking people to rewrite those narratives rather quickly, and in a way that can shatter some of the beliefs that they hold about their identity, about their value.
Bree's comment about narratives becoming sticky reminds me of a paper written by education historians David Tyack and William Tobin in 1994 called The Grammar of School. Here they made an observation that, like languages, schools too have a set of grammatical rules and structures, ones that are so well established that no one really questions them anymore. Rules and structures such as dividing knowledge into subjects, age-based grouping, and the division of time and space. They remind us that since the beginnings of public education, there have always been competing educational philosophies exploring one of the quintessential questions in education: what do you mean by learning? And time again, the industrial age model has won over others, reinforcing that grammar of school. Now, if you follow me across my social channels, you might recall that my research study during my doctoral program was about how might we use design thinking to define and design a new grammar of school. One where students gain the knowledge, the skills, and the mindsets to innovate, create new products, new services, and new business models so that they not only thrive in future workplaces, but as global citizens as well. How we share that narrative is instrumental in turning challenges into purpose. The next two areas of loss that Bree's going to share are loss of time and loss of competence.
Change takes time. That's the long and the short of it. So like you have to want it, and it just can't be a side hustle. So a lot of times we see in companies when there's some sort of transformation or change, we're actually dealing with this with a client right now. We're announcing to the top 200 officers of this really large company that we're embarking on a project of codifying their culture. And there's some concern that to these 200 officers, that's going to feel like one more thing, and they are dealing with a lot right now, as you can imagine. And that's because and I can feel it intimately. It's like, oh, an announcement. Okay, what do I have to do? Okay, what are you going to send me? What do I have to read? What do I have to send my team? What's this going to change for me? It's all sorts of loss of control as well. And it's just that change takes time, and this is probably the hardest thing to do for companies. But we always advise, whatever amount of work you are putting on people's plates that have to do with change or transformation, see if you can take that same amount of work off of people's plates from somewhere else. And it's usually impossible. It's like, well, where does the rest of the work go? But practically speaking, it can be like, can we cancel this recurring meeting for a month just to give people back some time, or slow down this one project if we can to pick up another, or simply make the change something that serves people, that lightens people's loads. What are people doing that's onerous? They're reinventing the wheel. Is there change to be made that is more efficient and joyful? I will tell you, even for good change, people still resist for a whole host of reasons. But you have a lot better chance if at the end the change is for something that ultimately is going to make people's lives a little bit easier, and in that sense worth the investment of time.
And I think that's so interesting that you just brought up that one, like that piece, because it segues so nicely into the next one. Like hearing you say that makes me wonder how much of dealing with change comes with we don't feel like we have the time. And therefore, your next one is this idea of loss of competence. So, like, we've invested so much time that we've had an opportunity to invest years in becoming good at what we're good at. Yet, usually, you're right. When we want to change something, we have to deal with these are all the things I was doing before, and now these are the things that I also have to do moving forward that can lead to people feeling like they're not good at whatever the new thing might be. So talk us through a little bit the next one, the loss of competence.
Yeah, people hate not being good at their jobs generally. There's some rare souls. I actually know many of them who love a role in, say, like innovation or something that's a little bit like pushing the boundaries. Some people are wired for that, and that is fantastic. For a lot of people, especially if they did not choose the change and they're having to learn new skills, it just feels like, you can't blame people. It's like, I used to be good at my job. Now I'm a little less good at my job. And like, it's almost the definition of innovation, of growth, that when people are really, really like honed their expertise, it's because there's some predictability in what they are doing and how they have done it and the results that they get. But if you are like trying new products, new services, new ways of working, new technologies, whatever it is that's new, uh, it's novel, and therefore we'll mess it up a little more, or we need to experiment. And uh, sometimes I run this very unscientific poll when I give a talk on this topic, asking people to raise their hand. What percentage of time do you absolutely know what you are doing at work? Is it 90%, 50%, 70%? And people usually raise their hand for about 70%, which I would say either everyone just feels like is the right answer, or is maybe just true. One of those two. But we talk about if it's 50% or below, people start to question if they're in the right role, or if they are in the right company. And it's like, I imagine like back in the days of office culture. I remember actually when I first founded the innovation department in the school, honestly, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was totally making it up. We've never had an innovation department. It was not a common thing in schools. And I remember I was on my computer in a cubicle farm reading some Fastco article about innovation, and feeling like I could sense somebody was walking behind me, and obviously could therefore see my screen, and I minimized the window. And I thought to myself, it was my initial instinct. But if I think about it, I know why I did that. I did it because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. I felt self-conscious about, did this person walking by think that this was a good use of time or a bad use of time, that I'm reading an article, that maybe I should have looked busier writing an email or crafting something else, and I think that fundamentally that feeling comes up for people of, is what I'm doing, is this good? Does it look like good? Is this meeting expectations? This is where you get a lot of requests for leaders of we need to clarify expectations and write down things, because so much at work is people answering the question, am I doing okay? Am I doing the right thing? What is good? And the truth is, we're all making it up. But that doesn't make it any easier, especially in times of change, when expectations and skill sets, they're all just changing so quickly.
Bree reminds us here that change takes time. In a situation like the one we're currently faced with, it feels as if time is the last thing that we have on our side. It's here I'm always reminded of Simon Sinek and the ideas that he shares about change, from the importance of identifying your why and sharing that with others, to the idea that it's better to go slow in the right direction than to go fast in the wrong direction. So far, Bree's covered 5 of the 6 types of loss. We've talked about loss of control, loss of pride, loss of narrative, loss of time, and loss of competence. Bree shares the final type of loss we experience when going through change, and that is loss of familiarity.
Change, by definition, means that things are a little bit less familiar. And, I have it here because I think it's important for people to have empathy for what it feels like. Sometimes we forget, but what it feels like to lose even the invisible familiarity that we've come to find comfort in. Um, so for example, I just, one of my projects at work just ended. It was a wonderful project. Our team just got really close. Our PM moved away, and it was so sad because I just adore her. And I realized in the project, I realized I just loved this team and this work, but I didn't realize quite how much I loved it until it ended. And especially through all this whole COVID time too, seeing the same 5 faces that I so adore on a screen every morning, it was just like therapy. Like, it just filled me up. Because I had something that was consistent. I knew them. And sometimes we don't even realize what sort of comfort familiarity can give us until it's gone. Or I'll give another kind of silly example. We actually moved out to New Jersey to live with my in-laws for a few months this summer because we needed some space and childcare help. And we got there, and I realized this is like real champagne problems, but they don't have an espresso machine. And we have one of those little Nespresso things. And the amount of comfort that I get from making my coffee every morning in the exact same way with a little Nespresso pod, and I put a little chocolate and milk. I didn't even know what that meant to me until it was gone. And it's silly and it's stupid and it's like, just breathe, drink some different coffee, like, get over it. But there's so much, there's like, humans need some kind of consistency in their lives, at work. And to make some kind of change, to go through transformation, sometimes you don't even know what sort of familiarity you are messing with for people. Just like moving, I didn't even know I was going to really miss this silly little Nespresso machine, but it meant a lot to me. And you never know, like, even if you are transforming, trying on some new ways of working, you don't know who missed the old ways. If you are adopting, maybe at the highest level, like a new strategy or a new set of values or some new company, like, sometimes we don't realize what the old version really meant to people. And it's hard to know what sort of familiarity you're taking away. And so, my advice always to leaders, and what we always try and help them with, is what can you share that will be the same? What sort of consistency can you offer so that people know what they can depend on, even as things are shifting around them? Because sometimes it's like you need very little, but you do need something. And it should be something that is going to be consistent for you. Like, even as we pop around to different apartments, or like, actually we came back to New York and picked up an Nespresso maker. So, and it made things so much better. Just like, what are those small things that you can give people to weather whatever kind of storm, a rough storm, a joyful storm, whatever kind of transformation you're going through, so that people have something of the, like, good old fashioned security blanket.
We all have rituals and things that make up such an important part of our day, yet we don't realize just how meaningful they are until they're taken away. For me, it was my morning stop for coffee. In my work, I traveled, and one of my favorite parts of my day was exploring a new morning coffee shop en route to wherever I was going. It was something so small, yet something that brought me so much joy that I didn't even realize. It's those kinds of things that it's important to become more self-aware about, so that we can practice more gratitude and be more aware about what brings us joy. I asked Bree what advice she would share about being more aware about what brings us meaning as we navigate the different possible futures ahead of us.
My husband and daughter and I were moving to England in a few weeks through the end of the year. And we've just like Brad and I sort of looked at each other and we were like, huh, like you're remote, I'm remote, our daughter's school is remote, our lease is up at the end of this month. Like, let's go on an adventure. So we're gonna move. We're gonna hang out in a little Hobbit style house in the English countryside. Um, and even in all this planning, like I have to remind myself, I'm like, I do change for a living. Like I'm supposed to be somewhere on the internet. It says I'm an expert on this stuff. And I think about that like, oof, it's easy to talk about it when you go through it. It's like, shoot, this is hard. And I always have to like remind myself what it feels like to go through change. And obviously this is a change that we're choosing. I hope it'll be like a good COVID adventure as we quarantine out there in the Wiltshire somewhere. But even in that, I'm thinking through, honestly, I'm thinking through, can we get a UK adapter for my Nespresso machine? And like, it's silly. It's like, it's so silly, right? Like I feel silly just saying it. But there is something about like, coffee, it wakes me up. It tastes delightful. It fuels me. I know how to make it the exact same way every day. And like, for me, it's the consistency that allows me to handle and shepherd a ton of change, well, for myself, but also for my clients. And, I think it's not dissimilar from uh, parenting. And, I've learned so much in the 5 and some years that I have been a parent that children both really crave structure and they really crave autonomy and adventure. But you really can't have the latter unless you have the former. Like you really like children need to feel safe, loved, cared for, like you're not going to let them fall off a staircase. And to have that structure allows them to be adventurous. And the same thing is true in organizations, in like giving people a sense of structure and stability allows people to take risks, to be innovative, to be creative, to try new things. And the same thing in our lives too. Like I'm glad we're trying an adventure abroad, and we're going to do it with my very beloved Nespresso maker in tow, because that's the thing that gives me structure in my day. And it's that really interesting, not even tension, but like the coexistence of structure and risk and adventure that I think like those two things make each other possible.
I think that's so fantastic. And I think what I really hear you say from that is that there are rituals almost that you can carry with you to help you adapt, I think, in some ways. And I think by holding on to some of those things, again, that transition can just feel not so scary because you have this, in your case, the coffee that can ground you sort of in, some structure that allows you to take on all the other challenges. So thank you so much for walking us through all of those. It was so helpful, and just the like the cohesion between them, I think was also something that I feel like I just kind of got from you for the first time, which was really nice. But once we kind of get to this place where, okay, we've been able to acknowledge these things, we are comfortable moving forward with change. So many people right now, I feel like, are caught in between like the logistics of just getting something done and just getting up and running and just getting to a good place again, versus a lot of people who are very curious about really just thinking about what different futures might be. And I use the word plural because I think there's so much choice out there for people in terms of what they can do to best meet the needs of their communities, of their people, and things that they need. What advice do you have for people that are thinking about or are curious about building new futures?
Hold close to your values, which I don't know, sounds like sure, Bree. But I say that because like when I think of even just like of like Brad and I thinking about our possible futures, like where do we live? New York, New Jersey, England, somewhere else entirely. Get a bigger apartment so we can both work from home. That like, the value we've always held a value of adventure, of we've always just appreciated other cultures and travel. And so as an opportunity arose to think about our different futures, that value shone through, of adventure, of travel. I think if I think from an organizational lens, crisis is a great revealer. It is a great revealer of cracks in the system and people. It's a great revealer of strengths as well. It's the revealer of whether all those values that are printed on some wall somewhere are words on paper, or if those really shine through for people. And I think about SYPartners, and our company is just built on people and relationships, like more so than any other company I've seen or been a part of. And when we started, our CEO said, our goal is to get on the through it's back in March. Our goal is to get out of this with the same people we have going into this. Or in other words, we don't want to lay off anybody, furlough anybody. And it's hard to do. Our business was going to take a hit just like everybody else's. And we had to make choices too about like our spending, certainly high, like it wasn't, and honestly, lots of companies furloughed people, laid off people, and I totally understand that business decision. And sometimes that is the best one. For us, it felt both possible and worth fighting for, because that was a value. It's how our business runs. And so to make choices about like, we don't know how this is going to go, but we are going to hold this value as dear and close to us as possible. And we are going to make decisions based on that value. So that's the first one. And second, I'd say, and similarly, we've been talking a lot about it's ever more important to have a compass versus a map. So whereas a map, you might like figure out your road, like I'm going to take this road here and this road here and then turn left and right. The world just changes too fast for that to be like any good for anyone. I mean, certainly like to get the lay of the land, but not to chart a route. In the same way that traditional strategic planning is kind of just, you can do it and like enjoy yourself, and that's probably going to be outdated pretty soon. I would say, like, instead of that like charted course, use a compass. A compass just tells you what's north. Like, am I kind of going in the direction I want to be going? And it gives you much more optionality for how you get there, when you get there. And in business in particular, like we're all in the long game. Like it's nobody is going to win a pandemic. Like some people maybe lose a pandemic, and certainly, and if the business cannot survive, but like if you are surviving, just step by step, keep going north, whatever that north is for you, whatever those values are. And then, you can imagine, like, whether that imagined future then is like Canada or Norway or Russia. I think it gives you more flexibility, because the truth is it's just too hard to plan. And in fact, I talk with a lot of people about like goal setting, and like I always think, oh, that sounds like a good thing. I've never wanted to set a career goal. I'm horrible with it. Like my only strategy in my career is take the next best step, and that's it. Like, what choices do I have in front of me? Directionally, does this get me closer to what I think, where I want to be? If yes, go there. And over time, I think maybe not a strategy for everybody, but it's worked for me.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for walking us through all of those and giving us some direction as we move forward. If people want to learn more from you, where is the best place for them to go?
Sure. I have a website, www.br.ee. It was actually a really nerdy, romantic anniversary present for my husband, that he found this Estonian website, the .ee, or the URL, and purchased it for me. That is how nerdy and lovely our marriage is. But yes, so because I have that, the website is br.ee. And you can learn more about me and some of what I've had to say and write. And also SYPartners, a company that I love, where I'm a principal and do all of my consulting work. SYPartners.com. Just a really brilliant group of people that I love being a part of.
That is so fantastic. And I will link all of that for people in the show notes and in the blog post that I do alongside the episode. Bree, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your incredible knowledge.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much. It was a ton of fun.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you still have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Sprint to Success with Design Thinking community.